right, everybody, welcome and thank you for tuning in to WRUU LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. This is the Adam Messer Show, and I'm your host, Adam Messer, with Sebastian Messer playing today for us. You ready, Bass? Nice. That was really good, Bass. Thank you. Thank you. And if you're just now tuning in, or if this is if you're listening to the second episode of this podcast today, my special guest is author Michele Tracy Berger. Michele, welcome back.
Hello, Adam. Woo! I feel like we were on fire the last hour.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And you know, when you're talking about satisficing, I love that. Everybody, if you have, okay, so if you are listening now, you just now tuned in, I definitely want you to go back and listen to the podcast. But Michele, would you just give like a brief overview of that? Just a real quick overview. That way, people kind of have a point of reference if they're just now stepping into the show.
Absolutely. So we started by just talking a little bit about, what 2020 was like for most creative people. And, we talked about, the sense that many people were struggling with their creativity. And then we got into, I talked a little bit about inner critics and just a reminder that inner critics, if you're a creative person, you're going to have inner critics. They come out at different times. And also we see patterns of both perfectionism and procrastination. And so Adam was talking about kind of the challenges around perfectionism, and I started talking about, well, what are some of the remedies? What are some of the ways we can look at that pattern? And in my experience as a creativity coach, and also my experience just working with a lot of other writers, for most people who have a perfectionist drive or tendency, one of the things that tends to be helpful for them is to recognize that their work is usually at such a high quality, and they often don't recognize that. So this term that comes out of psychology, satisficing. So if they have a deadline, to remind themselves, okay, it may feel like I'm turning in like my 75% level of work, but actually I'm turning in something closer to 95% in terms of the quality of the work. It's just that usually I can't see that. So that's why it's helpful for perfectionists to tell themselves it's okay to turn in a certain level of work, because it's usually much stronger than what they know. Perfectionists really have a hard time seeing and feeling comfortable with the quality of their work and letting that go. So that's what tends to stop them. For procrastinators, who maybe we'll talk about in a minute, I'll just say procrastinators have a different kind of struggle in terms of just starting the work. So perfectionists usually will have the work done. They just have a difficult time letting it go because they feel like it doesn't meet their standard.
I think that's just fantastic. And as a creative person, I really think that it could apply to everybody, because
absolutely,
that's something in all aspects of life. It's so crazy. My friend and I, we talk about, like, there's some folks that they have a routine, right? And they have their daily thing that they do day in and day out. They don't necessarily create things, so they don't make things, but they have their routine, and, they go to their job, they do their thing. They might come home, have dinner or supper, and, then they watch they've got a TV show or something like that they like or whatever. So they have that routine and whatever. And I still feel like it applies to them as well, because even if somebody is not a creator or a maker or whatever you want to call it, artist or whatever, they're still going to feel that same way. And I feel like what you're saying about, like, okay, well, because we all have that question, like, is what I'm doing good enough? I know there are people out there who are narcissists that they don't think that, because it's a brain, it's a brain problem. But for the most part, most of the people that I know, that they always have, like, that question of doubt. It's like, oh, is what I'm doing good enough? Or, does it even matter? Because that's the same kind of question, right? It's like, well, does it even matter? Nobody's going to read my stuff.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Does it even matter if I finish the book?
Well, and I think it can manifest, right, no matter what career or industry you're in, people struggle with perfectionism, and it means they are delaying, or sometimes they have such a high fear of being wrong in public or doing it wrong that they stop themselves. And so I'll just share that one of the things that, I felt called to do was to offer, at first I was offering a lot of free writing support for writers. And then I developed these writing workshops, but to promote that, I wanted to do some videos. Well, this is in June, so I didn't have a ring light, and I didn't, I feel comfortable, I'd done a number of podcasts, and I had done some other media, but I had and I don't really think of myself as a perfectionist, but I had such stress and anxiety around putting together a very simple video to share with my people on my list and, on Facebook or wherever. And I just had to say, it's okay. It's not going to be perfect. So one thing is, like, it's okay. It's not going to be perfect. It's your first time doing it. It's okay to try. And it doesn't have to be, what Nora Roberts would do, right? Like, it doesn't have to be at that level. Like, you can there's value in doing something that you believe in, because I believed in the writer's retreat, and I believed that I had a message. And so just kind of taking the pressure off a little bit. And there's another term that I often use. It's called adultism. So we get to a space where as we become adults, it's also much harder if we feel like we're going to fail in public, if we're trying something new. And I think that can apply for people who are not necessarily in creative professions, because we just, as we get older, we stop learning how to fail in public or, look silly in public. And that Matthew Fox calls that adultism. And that can be like kind of very rigid way of being. And so for all of us, I think just being able to be more comfortable looking silly or trying new things. And some people are very good at this, but for some of us, we have a lot of internal language and feeling about that. Does that make sense? Oh
yeah, you're making sense. I think a lot of the social normatives that people go through, they experience it again in childhood. They're taught to do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that.
Yes.
By the time you're an adult, you have real consequences as well. It could be, it's so crazy. It's not always the person who is the most skillful at a job that gets promoted. Often it's the person that the boss likes the most. So those kind of things where, if you're doing something like, publicly for embarrassment purposes or whatever, you're like, I'm not going to do that because I've never done it before, or people might laugh at me or whatever. I totally get what you're saying. It's one of those things where people are, they're kind of conditioned not to do that kind of stuff. It's like, hey, don't act like the weirdo. Don't,
Right. Well, Well, and I think part of it is, and of course you and I are saying we want people to be discerning, right? So it's not like do something that's,
but, don't do something
I do think,
totally stupid.
Yeah, right. But I do think it's like, so I try to ask myself, okay, what is the worst thing that can happen if you produce a video that's not well lit? You know, what's the worst thing that can happen? Right. Either people are going to resonate with what you're offering, or they're not. And it's probably not going to just come down to like a 2-minute video per se. So if you can ask yourself, okay, what's the worst thing that's going to happen around this? Usually you can say, okay, I can live with that. I can be uncomfortable, you know, for those few minutes, right? And then once I did the video, I was like, because I so believed in these writing retreats, and I wanted to often, I was really excited. I was like, who cares? You know, and I hadn't gone, you know, I mean, I looked presentable, but I didn't have the ring light, you know, all of the things, right? And I was like, you know, it's fine. And once I did that, the good thing is once you kind of have a little mini breakthrough, then it allows you to take that feeling and then bring it into other places that you might be holding yourself back.
I love that, Michele, because that is the doing part. It does give you kind of like that pass. Like, hey, you know what? It's okay to not, again, going back to what Savannah Gilbo said, you know, what you said, you know, Savannah Gilbo was like, be okay with putting out B- work. Hey, Bill, how you doing?
Great.
And then I love what you were talking about with satisfying. I keep wanting to say it wrong, but I love that because it's like you almost give yourself permission to put work out there and not give yourself the runaround or the, you know, beat yourself up kind of thing about like, oh, I didn't do this or I didn't do that, and you know, or I should have. It's like next time you can build on that, but you can't build on you know, a blank page. You know, if you can't edit a blank page, so you can't make that next video better if you didn't make the first one.
That's absolutely right. And a lot of times we don't, and this just generally goes to creative people. We are actually really bad at evaluating, you know, what is going to resonate with other people. Like we actually are really bad at that. And we stop ourselves from then, you know, just exploring, especially in those first couple of drafts. And like, if you're doing early drafting, it's easy for people to talk themselves out of ideas because we think, oh, well, who's going to want to read that? Or that's kind of a silly tangent. So, you know, I
have something I want to share with you about that.
Yeah.
I love it. No, go ahead. I was just saying I want to share something with you. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, so that's the other reason why, you know, getting comfortable with saying like, it's okay to, you know, play with ideas. It's okay to take risks, you know, especially when we're just by ourselves. Like it's understandable when we're doing something that's going to be public, but especially when we're by ourselves. I mean, I literally was just doing, I have a Slack group and I do a monthly coaching call for the writers. And literally just yesterday, there was a emerging writer who basically said, you know, she just keeps crossing. We were talking about revisions, and she just keeps, you know, crossing things out and like keeps going over the same material. And I'm like, you've got to move to the next level. But so when we get in that perfectionistic mindset, it can really just stop the flow of the words. And so I always say, look, we're here to produce the quantity, and yes, quality is important, but that can come at a later stage. So that comes at the more, you know, evaluation, submitting it, sending it out, getting feedback, but not in those early first waves of creative work.
I think that's so great. You know, when you're talking about Slack, okay, so I have a Discord group, but back in the day when Slack first came out, I had a Slack group, and just the fact that you've created a community around that is exceptional, because it is so difficult, y'all. I'm just gonna put this out there. It's so hard to get people to get off of Facebook, like, you know, anything off of Facebook, you know, to just say, hey, come check out my email list.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know about that. I'm like, yeah, but I don't want to put everything on Facebook because, you know, nothing against Facebook, okay, but it's just so convenient for people that's all they want to use, and they don't want to go somewhere else. So the fact that you got your own Slack group, And everybody out there, Slack is it's a program where it's like a forum board. You also could put files on there. You could do all kinds of like one-on-one type stuff with people. It's great for business. So if you don't,
I love Slack, and I love it because it doesn't clutter up our email. So like isn't it right? Like you're saying, and I'm just amazed that it's so cool that you were using it, many years ago. It just reduces the communication, and like you said, you can kind of keep it all in that platform, in that community. And so
to me, it's like the first, like remember when they first started doing the online classes for college, and you had the online forum boards, and it's like that, but for business. And so I think it's great. I've actually, that's one of the areas that I've tried to get going with Discord, but it just hasn't happened. I think I'm going to try that. I'm going to try doing Slack again.
Yeah,
it's been the years since you used it.
Yeah, well, I like the visuals of it, and it's very intuitive. Where I've gotten invited to Discord groups and communities, and I haven't quite clicked yet. I mean, I know people love Discord, and like you said, to it's important to be in creative community wherever people find it, whether it's on Facebook or Slack But I didn't even know that. Are you creating? Because I know you have a Facebook group for authors. Not to talk too much shop, but do you have like a Discord group for Valhalla authors? Or?
I do. I have an indie authors and readers group that is open for authors who are not with Valhalla, and for readers, so that people can check out like what's going on. And then I have one group for Valhalla books, which is just kind of focused on stuff that we're doing with Valhalla books. And the Discord channel is for Valhalla books, but it's the same kind of thing. It's like I don't know. It's just, well, I have to say it like this. It's like there's so much time in the day, and
yes,
there with that, I'm not really focusing on edutainment or education. I'm just strictly kind of like, hey, this is what we got going on, yada yada yada. Where like with yours, you have educational value that you're giving them, and I'm sure that like even talking with you, it's very entertaining. We're having a good time, a conversation. So I'm sure that they enjoy it, as well. And that's one of the things that I would like to do is like I've got to do the station ID real quick. I'm sorry, it's past time. Everybody, you're tuning in today to WRU LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. So Michelle and I, before we got on the radio today, we were talking about like an email list. So like with Valhalla Books, what I did was I started a new email list. I scrapped my old one because it was just kind of defunct, and I didn't have like people participating and that kind of thing. Blah 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 blah. Well, I started the new email list last year because I wanted to engage with people who wanted to be there and who wanted to see stuff about Valhalla books and about what we're doing. That's what I want. I'm not trying to chase the huge numbers. I'm trying to do like what you're doing, Michelle. I'm trying to just connect with people, and that to me is so like I talk about relationship building all the time. I talk about focusing on relationships and not transactions. Transactions are part of everyday life. But when it comes to people, the things and other things go, material stuff comes and goes, but the relationship you have with people, that's what matters to me. And
absolutely.
Yeah. So building that community, it's not just a buzzword. It's not just a, kind of like a catchphrase. And, when you're talking about earlier about sometimes it's hard for us to figure out like what people want. And this is what got me with that too, because Bass, when was that? Like 6-7 months ago, 8 months ago, we were talking the thing about like what could I do to help engage people more? And you're like, man, just be yourself, and they'll follow you, they'll find you.
It was like a couple months ago.
Yeah. So like Sebastian and I were talking. We were at the Walmart getting some food from the deli, and I was talking about like I've been trying to figure out how I could be more engaging with my YouTube channel and. That kind of thing. And Sebastian's like, well, just be you. People are going to find you and they're going to like that, who you are. Right. So that's what I've been doing. And I have been, but I'm not like some kind of internet sensation. I'm not, folks aren't like just coming at droves, but I really appreciate each and every person that does want to connect. I got a message yesterday from a reader who she was listening to the podcast, not this podcast, but the Valhalla Books podcast. She was listening to that, and she reached out to me on Facebook and sent me a message saying, "Hey, I really like your show. I saw this because I was checking out the new book. It's called 2B. And, I really enjoyed it. I just want to, tell you thank you." And then she asked me if she could ask me some questions about writing and publishing and stuff like that. And I was like, yeah, of course, and so we talked and, we messaged or whatever and yada, yada, yada. But that kind of interaction for me, that's what I'm looking for. And I'm very appreciative of that. And so like when you're talking about having your group, it doesn't matter. Like Slack could come and go. Those relationships that you have built, they will carry on and they will persist. And that's something I really admire.
Yeah, I'm nodding my head, and we're totally on the same wavelength. And one of the reasons why, so one, your son is obviously wise beyond his years. I remember this from the last time I was on, so it was such good advice he gave you, to be yourself, because that is what is going to, attract people over time to your community. But part of the reason why I did Slack is, I have a newsletter list, and I feel like I really try to provide quality resources. I do, submission calls for them and just provide a variety of resources for them. And they always get a pug picture of some sort. And so that's sort of my signature. But I noticed
so cute.
that, everyone is, people are a little fatigued on newsletter lists. And so I wanted a way for people to do like that next level engagement, which is what you're talking about. So, and to do it in a way that I could feel like I'm supporting them. Because the other thing I heard is that, and I think maybe, your audience will resonate with this, creators feel that they have to do it all, whether it's Instagram, Facebook Live, whatever. And that can be really draining. So it's also, we want to invest time with people who want to invest time with us, right? So like I'm more than willing to provide certain resources and support, for free, if you really are going to then show up, right? So I think it's also trying to figure that out and where your kind of where your communities are. And so a lot of people love Discord. I would say I have a slightly older community on my newsletter list, just because of the workshops that I was doing over a couple of years. And so those folks, I'm not making any assumptions, but they're less likely to be on Discord, but they might check out Slack, and some of them are on Facebook. So I think it's also, looking at where your readers are too. Some of your readers, they may not necessarily want to hang out on Facebook. And some of them, like you said, also may just love Facebook and want to do everything within Facebook. So it is trying to find out what you have the energy for, and also find out where your folks are. And congratulations on, every time you get an email like that, it is so, like, I feel like we live on that. Like, it's great if other people
That's
only
wonderful.
knew, right? Like, from writers, from other creative people, and from readers. Like we live on that. I mean, because most of the time we're not going to experience that. We do the work, we don't get attached to it, we send it out in the world, and then we do more work. And sometimes we hear things and sometimes we don't, but it's wonderful to get that feedback. So congratulations.
Thank you. Talking about that same thing about lack of feedback, that is, I feel like, the reason why reader reviews are so critically important for authors, because there's two schools of thought that I've seen, right? One is some authors don't read reader reviews at all. It's just kind of like some film stars don't watch their movies and they don't listen to anything like that.
Right.
I'm not of that school. I'm more of like the second school, is like I like looking at what the readers are wanting, and and what they enjoyed about it, what didn't work for them, that kind of thing. And so I feel like that connection is really important. And then the other thing too, talking about the same thing about feedback, writing can be a very solitary endeavor, like you said, and a lot of folks, like you were talking about earlier, they hadn't built a support network or whatever around their writing. And then, here we have a pandemic, and it's like people are dealing with things that they've never had to deal with in their lifetime. And so, it became like very solitary, not just the writing, but, living. It was very solitary.
Yes.
And I feel like community is so important. When you're talking about the fight or flight earlier, and that being part of procrastination and that kind of thing, perfectionism, procrastination, the other side of that is the tend and defend part, right? Right. So that's the flip side, because typically men have that fight or flight. Women have more of a tend and defend when they have that same kind of mechanical, chemical brain thing go boom, hey, danger, danger, the adrenaline rush or whatever. And I feel that has been hyper exaggerated this last year as well. And that, the tend and defend, like I've seen it. And just same thing with, people being hyper vigilant and people being hyper aggressive. And, some people are like hyper protective, and, it's all the same coin, right? It's all coming from the same place.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that sense of, freeze. So there's fight, flight, freeze, and I like to tend and defend. And I think some creative people just really, were stuck and just not able to move forward. I want to come back just for a minute for the reviews, because I want to echo what you're saying in that. I think it's really good for authors to periodically look at their reviews. And some advice that I got that was really helpful is to actually, just to read them and just like look at the words that people are using to describe what they like. And, maybe even put that in a word cloud, especially if you have a lot of reviews. But it's helpful. I mean, I think it's helpful to check in, to get a sense of, okay, what are my readers resonating with, as well as what are they not liking. So I'm with you. I don't say, I don't think it's good to get fixated on reviews, but it is good to check in and see, and also to look at reviews on different platforms, because the Goodreads reviews, and I'm on Goodreads, but I marveled by the detail and the emoji use on Goodreads. Like when people really love something, they really love it. When they don't like it, they don't like it. And that's very different than the feel on Amazon, right? So I do think looking across platforms to see what your readers, how they're resonating with your work is important, and not to shy away from that. But some people, if you're not ready to do that, you don't have to do that right when your work is published. Like you can wait a couple of months. Like if you have a novel or materials out. I
was just kind of thinking when you were talking earlier about like putting something out there, right? Putting something out there and just kind of being avoidant of any kind of embarrassment or failure or that kind of thing, right? I was just thinking that like reader reviews, that ties into that, right? It's some people that I've noticed that they don't like reader reviews. They also don't like criticism, and they're not very good at taking any kind of constructive criticism or negative criticism. And so, and it makes sense. I mean, some people are like, whatever. I'm not knocking anybody. I'm just not of that school. I'm more like, you know what? I want to see what people are. I want to hear what they think, because, I am not just writing this for me. I'm writing this for me as a reader and the other people who are like me, who like this kind of stuff. But I'm not writing it just to say, hey, I wrote something. I'm writing it because I want to, reach you as the reader and say, hey, you know what? I thought this was a cool idea. I thought this was a neat story. What do you think? Did it work for you? Did it not work for you? What was busted? What was cool?
And what's so great about that? I heard Rachel Herron, who is just she's a wonderful writer. She also has a podcast called How Do You Write? And she said she's written memoir and fiction, and she's been published both traditionally published and she has done indie publishing. And she just said, look at any author that you like. They've got 2-star reviews and they've got like 5-star reviews. So to kind of, it's okay. And in some ways, you have arrived when someone has written you like a 1 or 2-star review.
Yeah.
Because, and you're not, that's the thing, you're not going to be for everybody.
Yep.
As much as the stories we tell, we want them to resonate with people, but ultimately we're going to find our readers. So it's okay. And I'm just, if anyone out there is listening who's a writer who's gotten a 1-star or 2-star review, it's okay. That's, now if all your reviews are 1-star or 2 stars, that's a different story. That means, you also deserve, I guess, kind of going back to the perfectionist thing, we all grow and we all get better over time. And so it's okay. I guess if we're going to, we can't let ourselves be stopped, right? And I was going to say, it's so, you were talking about, saying people who don't like criticism. The other thing is that we're all, as creative people, we're vulnerable, right?
Yeah,
and so we kind of have to find ways to both get our work out there, get feedback, and then to be a little detached, because once it's published, right?
It's no longer me, it's the book.
Yep. Yes. And people are going to have their responses, and we can't control that. So
I had
that's a tough
lesson
to learn.
That is a tough lesson to learn. I had a funny one. I had a reader give the anthology a 5-star review. Did a critique of all of the, which is cool. Yes. They did a critique of each story, and in my
really,
it was cool. And in my story, they said I was rambling on, and I was like, huh? And then I had another person who reviewed the book, the same kind of format. They gave us a 5-star review, gave an individual story critique. The other person said I was brilliant and that it was masterful writing. And it's like two spectrums, the two opposite ends of the same spectrum. I'm either boring and rambling on, or I'm masterful and I'm brilliant. I don't know which, and I take both with a grain of salt, because I'm like, I'm not quite masterful and I'm not quite a dullard, but I'll take somewhere in the middle.
Right. Well, right. And I think that's so funny. I think that's something that Rachel Herron also says. It's like, believe in some ways the 4-star reviews, because, with the 5-star reviews, those are your super fans. People who are like, I just love this work. And then the 1 or 2-star reviews are people who, for whatever reason, they can, maybe not in the case of your anthology, but sometimes people pick up books and it will say, like, the book is urban fantasy, but the reviewer will say, well, I don't really read urban fantasy.
Like, why'd you pick up the book?
It's like, it's sort of funny that way. But being okay with, people are going to read your work and get different things out of it. And I think it's great that for anthologies, because when I first started publishing or getting published, I was appearing in anthologies, and what I saw some reviewers do, they would say, I was given this arc and asked for an honest review, and they're like, I've only finished like 3 stories, but I'm going to talk about the stories. Like, I'm going to talk, and it was just,
like,
it was so odd.
Why would you give a review and not be finished with it? I mean, like, I can't do that. Hold that thought for a second, Michelle, because I got to do the station stuff. Everybody, thank you for tuning in. This is the Adam Messer Show, and my special guest is author Michele Tracy Berger. And here are the station IDs.
What does it mean when we say that WRUU is a community radio station? It doesn't just mean that we invite the community to create programming. And it doesn't just mean that we are a voice for the community. It also means that we are counting on the community to keep us going. And you are the community. Almost all of our modest budget comes from small annual or monthly donations from listeners like you. You get to enjoy our community-focused programming because many others have stepped forward to do their part. Now do your part by joining our community of listener donors. Go to WRUU.org right now and make a one-time or monthly donation. And thank you for supporting Savannah's community radio station, 107.5 FM.
From our cobblestone streets to our stately homes, discover Savannah's maritime history and what makes Savannah, Savannah. One of the hidden secrets of Savannah is the Gardens of the Ships of the Sea Museum. Picnic here and enjoy our complimentary Wi-Fi. More information can be found at shipsofthesea.org. This is a message from the Georgia State Department of Public Health. There is a State of Georgia hotline people can call with questions or if they think they may have been exposed to the COVID-19 virus. It is 1-844-442-2681. If you believe you're experiencing symptoms of COVID-19 or have been exposed to the novel coronavirus, please contact your primary care doctor, an urgent care clinic, or your local federally qualified healthcare center. Please do not show up at an emergency room or healthcare facility unannounced. More information can be found at dph.georgia.gov. From our
All right, we're back. So yeah, Michelle, I agree with you. That's just kind of weird. It's like, why would you say, "Hey, I'm going to leave a review"? I've read 2 or 3 of the first, 15 stories or whatever, but I'm going to leave a review. You can't,
No.
It's like, hey,
But
I'm going to leave a review on this steak that I ate, but I only ate the first bite.
I've seen it though so many times, and it really confused me. This is probably about 4 or 5 years ago, in terms of getting published more in anthologies, and I was just so confused because I was like, who does that? But going back to the more important thing, what you said, or what we were talking about, it's all subjective. So I think that's an important thing for creators to remember as well. Like I was on the phone yesterday during the pandemic. 2 close friends and I, we now, since probably late March, early April, we just talk once a week. So anyway,
Nice.
My friend who is a writer, she was saying she's trying to change her literary story to make it a little bit more mystery oriented. And then my other dear friend, who I know adores Louise Penny, who's a very famous mystery writer, started talking about Louise Penny, and I just screwed up my face, and I was like, I really appreciate Louise Penny's craft, but it didn't, resonate with me. And I started, she has 15 books. I started in the middle of the series. So anyway, so then I could tell, so my friend who, she's known me 30 years, she was like, shut up. I was like, oh, Louise Penny. She's like, she's the only author I pre-order, and here I am, saying, look, there's a lot of people to read, and yes, you should look at the genre, but so it's subjective, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so but I do think us as writers, that's the other thing with the kind of circling back again to the perfectionism. A lot of times we are judging our work when it's new, when it's just starting out, to work that has already been vetted and published, and that's the other place that people can fall into a sinkhole. Because, as someone, you are a publisher, so the work it takes to get a book ready, right? And I, as someone who's been published, knows that process. But we forget that sometimes when we're writing, because we start comparing ourselves, but we have to realize, oh yeah, it's going to go through so many different steps and so many different drafts and so many different edits. So to kind of before it becomes its final version in the world.
Oh yeah, that I completely agree with you on that. It is a process for sure, and I know it sounds funny, but we all kind of drinking our own tea, right? And sometimes, especially as creators, sometimes you're like, man, this is the best thing since sliced bread, and you put it out there, and people are like, they're like, meep. Remember Beaker from the Muppet Show? Meep.
I do.
Yeah, that's you're like, oh well, this is. Did you see this? Did you see what I put? Meep. You're like, no, but did you? Are we talking about the same thing? Did you see this thing that I made? And just falls flat. And there's other times where you're like, I did something and I feel okay about it, and then other people are like, oh, this is so great, this is so wonderful, I love it. So yeah, it's
kind of so frustrating. It's very frustrating when that happens, right?
Yeah.
We get invested in like, oh, especially, I mean, obviously we work hard on our short stories and novellas.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some things that, right, like you think are just going to land really well. Or I don't know, you probably are part of a critique group or a writing group. There are times where you're like, oh, I'm so excited for my writing group to read this. They're going to, I nailed this scene, you're thinking that. And then they just completely miss it. They didn't, it just doesn't resonate. So it's so humbling.
I'll tell you, when I first started getting into fiction writing, it was like 2014, and I didn't publish my first book until 2018. But I was in several writing groups, and I was in, different critique groups and those kind of things. And I quit doing them. I quit doing them because I didn't have that kind of like you and your friends. I didn't have that same kind of relationship. Now, I want to just put a little caveat there. I have writing friends that we have conversations just like you and I are talking on the radio. Like, y'all, this is unscripted. This is just me and Michelle having a good time talking to each other, and the only difference is like, because we're on air, we can't cuss and that kind of thing. We're not talking about politics or religion or any of that stuff. But like this, that's how I have done the, just more so, not so much critiquing of my work per se, like, hey, we'll trade out, we'll read this kind of thing, but more so like, hey, this is what I'm working on, this is a project. And then Josh and I are doing this accountability thing. It's more like it's not the writing, it's the writing. It's not like what the story is, it's doing the work, right?
Yeah.
And that for me has been such a great thing because it's one of those things where I can hit deadlines, I can pump out deadlines, I can help other people stay on track and performance so that they can hit their deadlines and that kind of thing. But when it comes down to it, it's like I have these things that I want to do and I want to get them done, and I've kind of just at some point I feel like the maybe it's just I wasn't in the right group or whatever, or maybe it's just the kind of person I am, I don't know. But I was just like, those didn't work for me. So I tried, something different. It's not that I didn't get critiques. So I'm still getting critiques, but it's more of, that method just didn't work for me. I know some people, and this is the other end of the spectrum. And this is one of the reasons why I left most of these writing groups. There's a point, like we've been talking this last 2 hours, there's a point where it's like, just put it out there, just finish the work. And, some of the folks, they're in love with the idea of writing and they write, but they're in love with the idea of writing, not publishing, so they write and they share it with their groups or whatever. And most of the people I've ever read, oh, I'd love to, at the same time, they're not doing that other part, which is like, hey, you can write it for yourself if you want, no problem. But if your goal is to be an author, published author or whatever, put the work out there.
Yes.
And that's one reason why I kind of stepped away from those groups, because I was like, they weren't the doers as much as I wanted, them to be. They just weren't.
Well, and your experience echoes, I think, many writers. So there's not one way to get writing support. So I think writing groups can be helpful, but for me, my experience at least, I've always had to vet the group. So like, I feel like they interview me, I interview with them, I hang out with them. And it's also helpful to be, to your other point, it's also helpful to be in a group where there are people who are working at maybe a level just above you, as well as like people that are on your level, because then, it's not so lopsided in that like everyone is new to the process. So if you have at least one or two people who, maybe have a little bit more experience, that helps. But it has to be, I feel like the group also, there need to be rules in terms of, and kind of a personality, kindness, to be forthright about the work, but also to recognize, we're all people here. We're all trying to make our work better. Yeah. But I also know writers who, like you, who have done groups, found that it wasn't helpful, but then they found this other system, which is, you know a lot of writers, you vet, you get people to talk through the work with you, vice versa. And that works really well. So I think we also have to be okay with saying, here's what's going to serve me well.
The Savannah Quilt is a community that I've built, and the premise of it is connecting writers and readers to promote literacy. And so when I found that the writing groups just didn't work for me, I built that. And I was like, okay, so the Valhalla books is an evolution of that, right? So I do this other thing called Savannah Books and Brews. Is a charitable event we do to help raise funds for the Ronald McDonald House. Me doing this radio show, talking with people like you, authors, not just authors, but I talk to creative people and all. Writing for the newspaper, doing the interviews with creative people, publishing books. For me, that is like, it all goes back to the storytelling. And that's one of the things, like I always say, and I'm not sounding funny here, I'm not trying to sound funny, but like what you just said, it's not prescriptive. I can't tell somebody this is what you should do. I could just say this is what works for me. And, and I know if it works for me, it can work for other people, but you can't just say, hey, I'm going to have a, just a cookie cutter. That never works for me. I guess it kind of goes back to, building the relationships. Like your group, like you said, you vetted that. You built that community. You built those relationships with those folks. And, like the folks, like your friend, 30 years, you've known each other so long that you could say, well, I don't really care for that particular author. And they're like, wait a minute, that's my favorite author. In a new relationship or a new group, somebody, those are fighting words. They're like, what do you mean you don't like so?
Right. Absolutely. Right.
We got to do the station break real quick. Everybody, you're tuning in today to WRUU LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Gold Soul. Bass, do you mind playing one last time before we end up for the day? All right, so here's Sebastian Messer, everybody. Oh, wow. That was really good, Bass. Thank you so much. Michelle, were you able to hear that?
I was. I love these musical interludes. It's so different and unique than, pretty much many other formats. It's very cool.
I appreciate that. Sebastian has been playing since, March will be 6 years?
Yeah, March 13th.
Yeah.
6 years.
So,
wow.
A little story about that. He wanted to play the guitar. And, you were 13, 12? Yeah. You had to be 12.
Probably 12 going on 13.
Yeah. So anyway, so he went to play the guitar, and I was like, all right, because guitar's expensive, an amp's expensive. So he and I like to cat around. We like going around town, just, looking at different stuff, checking out like thrift stores and that kind of thing. And one of the places we used to go to, and we still do, is a pawn shop. And this pawn shop, they sell like music equipment, they sell jewelry, they sell like tools and stuff, electronics, like computers and that kind of stuff. They don't sell cell phones, and they don't sell guns. So like they just kind of separate themselves because they're kind of like known as the music store. And so we go in there on this one Saturday, and they had what was that, a Squire or what was that?
They had a Washburn like a Lion. It's like a little
it's an electric guitar
off of
Washburn. They had a little amplifier, right? And it was like $100 for the kit. You got the amplifier, you got the the cord, you got the guitar.
Yeah, you got the amplifier cord, the little amp, and then the guitar for $100.
Yeah. So I was like, all right, I'll get this for you, because at the time he couldn't play soccer. Go ahead.
What a great investment.
Oh, I'm telling you.
$100? That's amazing.
I know. And he said, yeah, what, 2 lessons? That's it? Mm. He had 2 1-hour lessons over 2 different weeks because a friend of his, friend of the family, school teacher, all the kids had, her husband is a musician, and so we were able to do just 2 lessons, but he has been self-taught like since. I mean, like you only did the 2 lessons, and that was just like basic kind of like, hey, this is how you pluck.
Yeah.
So you've learned all this on your own, and I say on your own, but I mean through self-study of like, man, what an age we live in with the internet, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So
that's really impressive too, to be pretty much self-taught after a few lessons. That's amazing, because it's practice, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, the thing that really impresses me, and I tell him all the time, is that he has committed to doing this, where just for the love of it, right? He's not making money off of it. He's not, you just started doing your band, like the band. He's had a band for like, I don't know, 4 or 5 years.
Started.
Yeah, well, it's since you started, yeah. But this is the first time that he's actually had people in the band besides himself.
Yeah.
And so they're doing like, they did their first gig, they're getting ready to do another gig. And I feel like that is so true with writing or any kind of creative thing that you want to do. You got to do the work, because you can hear the difference. You can see and read the difference of when people are putting in the work and putting it out there and doing it versus it's kind of like that old phrase, you're not in love with me, you're just in love with the idea of me,
Yes, and that goes back to what you were saying earlier about sometimes writing groups really become social groups, or they become groups where people are not as motivated to take the next step. And taking the next step is learning about the publishing process and being savvy about that. So yeah, you got to do the work and then take the next step for sure. And it's joyful work, but it is like it's consistent work.
It's a grind. Right?
Well, no.
I love it. It's loving the work when the work doesn't love you.
Yes, there you go. Absolutely.
I love it though, because I mean, there's that, it's so exhilarating sometimes though when you finish. Like I said earlier, one of the best feelings for me is to hold that book in my hand. Just to see it physically appear.
It's one of the most powerful things, even though, what I like to say is that, it has a life of its own. It can travel in all sorts of places, and whatever the hopes you have for it, whether it meets those or not, just that moment where you get those, when you're holding the book, it is really powerful. And to hand someone a book, when they ask you, well, what do you write? And you actually have this book, it's really powerful.
I feel like it's amazing, and I feel like everybody deserves to have that. If they want it, they can do it, and they should. So
I'm in total agreement with that. And to do that, they have to get the support, though, right? Because
that's right.
If you're in your metaphorical writer's cave, and I talk about in my own personal narrative, I was sort of metaphorically in the basement, and this is like 15 years ago, where I kept rewriting like a 400,000 word novel. And I would go to writers conferences, Adam, and just not really. I mean, I would connect with people, but I just thought, I can figure out how to do this.
Right.
Really, I'm so lucky that I met wonderful teachers about a decade ago, and really helped put me on my path. And just, so you need that literary community, you need that writer support. Oh yeah,
just like with me and Josh, we're accountability buddies now, and that I feel like is a missing thing factor that I didn't have before. So I'm so appreciative of that. And then, of course, I love having friendships with people like you. You're a wonderful person. You always have a lot of great things to share, especially like today, just being able to take away that, that tool about satisficing. Right? Am I saying it right now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you did.
Yeah, so I'm so thankful. So, Michele, thank you so much for being here the last 2 hours. I really appreciate it. Where can people check out your stuff again?
Oh, well, I want to say thank you for having me on a second time. It's awesome. And people can find me at Michele Berger. That's Michele with one L, Michele, Berger, BERGER.wordpress.com. And I've already put up for your listeners a free guide, which is 10 ways to keep connected to your writing self during the pandemic. So I have a lot of creative, great tips. And if they click on that, then they'll get into my community and they'll get lots of little surprises along the way. And just, I'm on Twitter as well, so they can find me under my full name, Michele Tracy Berger. So love to connect with other writers and readers and keep the creative conversation going.
Well, thanks again, Michele. I really appreciate you being on the show. This has been wonderful.
Thank you.